Ladies and gentlemen, friends, fellow thinkers, thank you for joining me today. I want to talk to you about a problem. Not just any problem, a problem that sits at the center of our lives, yet evades all our scientific tools. A problem that haunts not only philosophers but neuroscientists, AI researchers, and contemplatives. A problem that resists solution but demands our most rigorous thought. I want to talk about consciousness. Not the scientific use of the word, which often refers to attention, wakefulness, or behavioral responsiveness. I mean consciousness in the subjective sense, the phenomenal, qualitative aspect of mind, the inner movie, the what it is like dimension of being, your experience right now of hearing my voice, of the feel of your body in the chair, of your inner stream of thoughts. That is what I mean by consciousness. This dimension of life is so intimate, so constant, that we rarely question it. And yet when we ask how it fits into the physical universe, the answers grow dim. This is the hard problem of consciousness, the problem that won't go away. And I submit to you, we cannot afford to turn away from it, because until we understand what consciousness is, we do not understand ourselves. When I first coined the phrase, the hard problem of consciousness, it wasn't to be clever, it was to draw a line. Let's be clear, the easy problems of consciousness aren't trivial. They're challenging in their own right. They include, how does the brain process sensory input? How do we recognize faces? How do we focus attention? How do we access information and report it? These are empirical, functional questions. We know how to approach them through cognitive science, neuroscience, computational models. We can build robots that do some of these things. But when it comes to why all this processing should be accompanied by experience, why there is something it's like to be a brain processing visual data, we run into a wall. Imagine you had a perfect model of the brain. You could trace every firing neuron, every synaptic connection. You understand the dynamics of every molecule. Would that tell you what red looks like? What pain feels like? What it's like to fall in love? It seems not. The hard problem is not a problem of function. It's a problem of being, of subjective existence. And that, I argue, is a different kind of mystery. Now, some have tried to dismiss the hard problem by calling consciousness an illusion. I want to say this clearly. Consciousness cannot be an illusion. Why? Because illusions themselves are conscious experiences. If I hallucinate a pink elephant, the elephant may not be real, but the experience is. To say consciousness is an illusion is to say that there is an illusion. But illusions must be experienced. So experience itself cannot be illusory. Some philosophers argue that we should only study behavior and information access and bracket subjective experience. I understand the impulse. Studying consciousness is hard. But let me make a comparison. Before Newton, gravity was mysterious. He didn't ignore it, he formalized it. Before quantum mechanics, particles were puzzling. We didn't deny their weirdness. We revolutionized physics. We must not shy away from consciousness because it's difficult. Rather, we must rise to meet its challenge. We must do philosophy with the same courage we once brought to physics. Philosophical zombies and the logical gap. Let me reintroduce the philosophical zombie, a being physically and behaviorally identical to you. Same neurons, same biology, but with no experience. It acts like you. It says, I see red, but experiences nothing. Now you might say, that's ridiculous, but it's logically possible. There's no contradiction in the idea, and that possibility tells us something important, that consciousness is not logically entailed by the physical facts. If I describe all the physical facts of the world, particles, forces, fields, atoms, brains, there's still a further question to ask. Why is there experience? And if that question still makes sense, then we must admit consciousness is something extra. something over and above structure and function. This doesn't mean we need to invoke supernatural souls or magical essences, but it means we need to expand our ontology, our map of what exists. Here's where my proposal begins. Let us take consciousness as fundamental. In physics, when we find something that resists reduction, we place it in our foundational catalog. We say, this is basic. Mass, charge, spin. We don't explain them further. They are the ingredients from which we build the rest. So why not do the same for consciousness? If we cannot reduce experience to information processing, maybe we should just include it among our primitives. That is not an abandonment of science, it's a generalization of it. I propose a naturalistic dualism, a view in which there are both physical properties and phenomenal properties in the universe, and the connection between them is governed by psychophysical laws, laws that relate physical structure to conscious experience. Our task, then, is to discover these laws, not through introspection alone, nor through brain scans alone, but through a new kind of interdisciplinary science, a science that bridges the first person and third person, the subjective and the objective. There is a beautiful idea in philosophy called the dual aspect theory. It holds that mind and matter are not two different substances, but two aspects of the same underlying reality. Think of a coin. Heads and tails are not two objects, they are two faces of one coin. Likewise, perhaps what we call matter and what we call consciousness are two views of a deeper entity. The physicist Erwin Schrödinger said it this way: the mind and the world are not two things. Perhaps behind the apparent duality, there is a unity. Now combine this with structural realism, a view in the philosophy of science that says what physics tells us is not the intrinsic nature of reality, but only its structure, its patterns and relations. Maybe consciousness is the intrinsic nature behind the structure. Maybe the reason physics is silent on what matter is because matter at its core is experiential. And this leads us tentatively toward panpsychism. Panpsychism is the view that consciousness, in some form, is present throughout the universe. Now, before you roll your eyes, let's make a few distinctions. Panpsychism does not say that tables or rocks are conscious. It says that the basic constituents of matter, particles, fields, whatever lies at the base, have proto-experiential properties. Very simple ones. Nothing like minds or emotions, but something that in combination might give rise to richer forms of consciousness, like ours. If you're willing to say that particles have mass and charge, is it really more outrageous to say they might have something experiential too? Panpsychism avoids the mystery of how consciousness emerges from a purely non-conscious substrate. Instead it says, it was there, in primitive form, all along. This idea is gaining serious traction. Thinkers like Galen Strawson, Philip Goff, and even some physicists are taking it seriously. It may not be the final answer, but it's on the table, and it should be. Now, let's turn to the future. We are building ever more sophisticated machines. AI that can mimic language, solve problems, simulate empathy. Large language models that pass the Turing test. Robots with sensors, memory, planning. But here is the burning question. Can machines be conscious? I believe the answer is perhaps. But we won't know unless we develop a theory of consciousness that can tell us what physical or informational systems generate experience. If we take consciousness seriously, we can't rely on behavioral tests alone. We must look deeper. We need theories, testable, principled, grounded in both empirical data and philosophical clarity. And if one day we do create conscious AI, we must be ready for the ethical questions. Do they have rights? Can they suffer? Are we responsible for their well-being? We may be future gods in a Silicon Eden. Let us tread carefully. In Reality Plus, I asked another question. What if we are already in a simulation? Some people laugh, some panic. But the idea is serious and surprisingly compatible with philosophical rigor. If we are in a simulation, then the laws of physics are computational rules. The world we inhabit is virtual, but real. Real as a simulation. Just as dreams are real experiences, though not realities in the ordinary sense. And if we are the simulators, if we build simulated worlds with conscious agents inside, then again, ethics rears its head. We must understand what consciousness is, not just for knowledge, but for responsibility. And most importantly, the simulation hypothesis reminds us that appearance is not the whole story, that the surface may not reveal the essence, and that's the same lesson consciousness teaches us every day. I have spent much of my career calling for a science of consciousness, a genuine interdisciplinary effort to combine neuroscience, psychology, physics, philosophy, and contemplative practice. We need better models of the neural correlates of consciousness, better theories like integrated information theory, global workspace theory, etc. Better first-person methodologies, meditation, introspection, altered states. Better philosophical clarity about what we are asking. This is not just a scientific project. It is a human project. Because to understand consciousness is to understand the only thing that gives the universe value. I have spent much of my career calling for a science of consciousness, a genuine interdisciplinary effort to combine neuroscience, psychology, physics, philosophy, and contemplative practice. We need better models of the neural correlates of consciousness, better theories like integrated information theory, global workspace theory, etc. Better first-person methodologies, meditation, introspection, altered states. Better philosophical clarity about what we are asking. This is not just a scientific project, it is a human project. Because to understand consciousness is to understand the only thing that gives the universe value. The mystery is the map. Let me close with a thought. Mystery is not the absence of explanation. Mystery is the invitation to seek one. The hard problem of consciousness is not a failure of science. It is its next frontier. Just as Newton dared to mathematize gravity, just as Einstein reimagined space and time, we too must be bold. We must ask, what kind of universe makes experience possible? And we must do so with open minds, philosophical rigor, and poetic humility. The light is on inside each of us. That is the greatest fact of the cosmos. Let us not explain it away. Let us explain it. Thank you. What do you think about consciousness? Please share it in the comments below.